Hey guys, welcome back. So today I'm going to be repotting this beautiful Monstera Deliciosa. She lives in my living room. I love to sit on the couch and watch TV and just admire her. As you can see, she is quite huge and she is in desperate need of a repotting. Her leaves are quite droopy, and that's due to the fact that her soil is no longer retaining any moisture. Now, we all love Monstera Deliciosas. They are so beautiful and so easy care, but it is the type of plant that has specific needs when it comes to repotting that will set you up for success. Some things about moss and trellis poles, what size pot to use, when the right time to repot is, what type of soil to use, what to do with aerial roots. Some people like them, some people don't. Some leaf care tips maybe to do while you are in the process of repotting your plant. I will also be repotting this beautiful Monstera Constellation and this little Monstera Albo cutting that I've been propagating in sphagnum moss that's ready to be repotted and put in soil. This is the old leaf. This is the new leaf. So as you can see, they're in all different stages of life. So my goal is that by the end of this episode, you will have all of the tips and tricks that you need to be set up for success when it comes to repotting your Monstera Deliciosa. If you're new to my channel, welcome. My name is Ashley and I am definitely a crazy plant person and proud. So if that brings a smile to your face, make sure to subscribe so future episodes will show up in your newsfeed. And also look me up on Instagram. I absolutely love my plant community. So my next steps are to take everything outside and get started on repotting. Also, a big thank you to our sponsor, repotme.com. I'm sure you guys have heard of them. I'll be using a lot of their products during this episode, and I have included a link in my description below. Repotme.com is dedicated to providing quality plant care products. They specialize in products for houseplants, orchids, succulents, African violets, and more. I love their incredible potting soil and mediums because they're all such terrific quality. Their pots and planters are also a favorite of mine for my plants. Their original Repotme designed pots, like the slotted orchid pots and oxygen core duo pots, help create the perfect environment for growing. They're also well known for their plant-specific fertilizers, pest prevention options, grow lights, care tips, and more. In this episode, I'll be using the tropical and houseplant soil, orchid bark mix, New Zealand sphagnum moss, and of course their slotted orchid pots. I've included their website in my description below so you can take a look at their quality plant care products. It's an absolutely beautiful day outside. I'm all set up and ready to repot. I would typically film inside to prevent any kind of background noise. However, this plant is just so huge, I had to do it out here. So you may hear some background noises, birds and that kind of thing. Everything I'm going to be sharing is pretty straightforward and simple. None of it is rocket science. However, like I said, with Monstera Deliciosa, there are definitely things you'll want to keep in mind when you are repotting to set you up for success. And the first one is repotting at the right time. So how do you know when it's the right time to repot your Monstera? The first thing you'll want to know is this plant enjoys being root bound. It likes its roots to be somewhat compact in its pot and all cozy. The time to repot is when the roots are completely compact and there's absolutely nowhere else to go with this plant. If you see roots coming out the top or if you see roots coming out of the bottom, if it's the growing season and the plant isn't showing any signs of new growth, then it's probably a good time to repot. As you can see here, the roots are very compact throughout the entire root ball. All very jam-packed, no more room to go. As you can see, the roots are coming out the top here. So sometimes you may see the roots coming out the bottom of the pot and think, okay, it's completely compact, I need to repot this plant. But before you do, double check that there isn't loose soil throughout the rest of the pot, because sometimes roots will go straight down to the bottom and there will be plenty of room left in the pot for roots to grow. Now, if your plant's not showing any new growth in its winter time, it may be dormant, and I would hold off on repotting at that time. I would definitely only repot if it's the springtime or if it's the summer, or if you're seeing new growth happening on your plant. That's the perfect time to repot your Monstera. The next important tip is to pick the right size planter. So with Monstera, I definitely wouldn't go more than 1 or 2 inches bigger when you're repotting. This one's a 12-inch and this one is a 14-inch. Another reason why you don't want to go too big on a planter is it increases your chances of overwatering your plant. There's a lot more soil in there if the planter's too big, and it just will retain a lot more water. And lastly, the plant is going to be putting all of its energy into filling up that planter with roots, and it won't have enough energy to maybe put out some brand new growth and some big beautiful leaves that we all love. So personally, I love using nursery pots. They're more malleable, they're easy when it comes to repotting, they're not heavy. If I have to cut it off of the plant, I can, and I couldn't do that with terracotta or ceramic. Then all I do is place the nursery pot in my decorative pot. These are actually orchid pots, but they're absolutely fantastic for plants like monsteras that want to climb up trees and like a lot of oxygen and air to the roots. These have a lot of drainage, and then they also have little slots on the sides that will allow oxygen to get to the roots. My next step is to check the leaves for pests, and this helps me know if I need to do something with the soil, because typically I do not like to disturb the root ball, and I find that my plants do way better if I don't cause any additional trauma or stress to the root system, and the plants can focus on putting out new leaf growth after repotting instead of recovering from shock and root trauma. In my experience, the roots find the way to the new soil without me poking holes and messing with the root system too much, and really the only time that I'll adjust the root ball is if I see pests, so checking the leaves is an important step for me and knowing what steps to take with the existing roots and soil. So what I have here is a 50% houseplant mix and a 50% orchid bark mix. When it's mixed up, it's going to create a super airy mixture for that plant. Now this plant is going to love all of these chunky bits. It likes to climb up trees. It likes a lot of oxygen to the roots, and that's what this is going to be providing, is a lot of opportunity for oxygen to reach those roots. As you can see, there's a lot of fantastic organic material in here, and this will enable the soil to be very well draining and prevent it from becoming overly saturated with moisture. Now with aerial roots, you do have a few options based if you like the way that they look or if you don't. If you don't want them to be hanging out of the planter, you can actually put them in the soil when you repot and they will grow soil roots, or you can trim them. And the thing with trimming is it won't hurt the plant, but it will cause the plant to put more energy towards recovering from root trauma instead of new growth. For this plant, I'll be putting them in the soil because this plant lives in my living room, which is a high traffic area in my home, and I don't want people and animals to be stepping all over the roots. But I've seen people do all sorts of really cool things with aerial roots, like putting them in water, putting them in fish tanks. You know, there's all sorts of cool stuff you can do with them. Now my next step is not a necessary step. I like to do it because it helps to prevent fungus gnats. You could use all sorts of different things. You could use pumice. I know people put cinnamon on top, sand. I'm going to be using orchid bark. Now, if you haven't already done this next step during the process, I highly recommend it, which is cleaning the leaves of the plant. Now, I know we already checked the leaves for pests, but as we all know, these leaves are meant to be solar panels so that they can catch the sunlight and photosynthesize to create energy for the plant, and it can put out a lot of new growth. You can spray the plant down with a hose if you don't have a lot of time. I recommend using neem oil to wipe your leaves down. It's a wonderful pest preventative. It'll definitely get all that dirt off. So if you have the time to use some neem oil on your leaves, I super recommend it. So trellis, planks, and moss poles. So I decided to keep the existing trellis with this Monstera. It's still tall enough. It was tied really well to the trellis, and I was able to just take the plant out with the trellis and put it back in. So just makes life easier, right? Like anything we can do to simplify. Now it's highly doubtful that this Monstera is going to attach to the trellis in any way other than how I've tied it to the trellis. Now this Monstera Thai Constellation I also repotted, and I decided to put a plank in here. The nice thing about a plank is that the aerial roots and the nodes will attach to the wooden plank, and it'll help it develop more mature leaves. Just overall, the plant absolutely loves it. I recommend cedar. Now you can use tape to stick the plant to the plank. You can use twine. And then the other option is moss poles. Moss poles are fantastic. The plant will attach to the moss pole as long as you keep the moss pole watered for those aerial roots. I prefer planks, but to each their own. There's no wrong answers. I also repotted my Monstera Albo cutting. On this Propagation, you can see it's definitely ready for repotting. Completely jammed in there, but look how beautiful and amazing these roots are. Now in this case, the roots are in sphagnum moss, and I'm going to try to get the sphagnum moss off. But again, I don't really want to disrupt the roots. I'm going to have to, a little bit. Now just pulling off the sphagnum moss, it's inevitable I'll be pulling off roots. So normally what I do here is I just put it in a bowl of water and I kind of just give it a little squeeze, or I tickle the roots kind of thing. And It just helps loosen it up and some of the sphagnum moss comes off. So last up is watering, and I do fertilize my plants a few times a month, but when I first repot them, I actually hold off on fertilizing them until they've had a minute to acclimate to their new pots and they are settled in. So definitely wouldn't water with fertilizer the first time after being repotted. All right, so those are all of the tips and suggestions that I know to help guarantee a successful repotting of your Monstera Deliciosa. If you have any questions, please leave them in the comments below. I do have to say that I'm so relieved that that is done and that these guys are repotted. I know they're gonna love their new pots and their new soil, and I'll probably post on my Instagram account how they're doing and updates. And if you're interested in seeing my future YouTube episodes, make sure you subscribe so they'll show up in your newsfeed. Now, if you have any questions about the different products that I used, all of the products were from our sponsor, repotme.com. They really are incredible. I highly recommend them. I know a lot of you guys already use them. I was trying to find nursery pots the other day and somebody messaged me, go to repotme.com, and I have included a link in my description to their website for you guys. All right, I hope you guys have a fantastic rest of the day. You will definitely be seeing me soon. Bye.